Hi everyone, I'm Ben Franks and welcome to my reflection vlog for Practical Techniques in Strength and Conditioning, SAC 7101. So Kuklik and Geraghty 2015 discuss how a coach's ability to reflect will determine how he or she makes meaning or knowledge from experience. So this is allowing myself as a practitioner to continually improve and ultimately provide a better service to whoever I am working with. A vlog of this nature is a welcome opportunity to conduct this continual reflective process in a formal context. So that this reflective practice does not go to waste and I conclude with practical takeaways for myself, I'll be using the reflective model introduced by Kolb in 1984. This will allow me to finalise each section I will be reflecting on with some pragmatic plan moving forward. So to provide some brief context, this session is with one of my clients who I see in person once a week and who carries out an additional program session alongside several conditioning classes and runs. I initially started working with her to rehab a glute issue along with a hip injury and has since evolved into some general strength training to supplement the rest of her weekly training. So this first clip is the initial element of our session where my client is carrying out her movement prep drills and I am attempting to gain insight into her day, what she's done the previous day, and just her sort of readiness to train. So she's very familiar with these drills, so needs minimal input from myself in terms of how to carry them out. And as she carries out an additional strength session independently, I like to instill some autonomy and competency within her sessions, so she's not relying on me for every single element. However, upon reflection, I think that I could take more of a lead in progressing these drills and reinforcing their purpose each session. As Turner and Comfort mention, this feedback could bring to light something the athlete is not aware of. Okay, so they've been a staple in her warm-up for a good few weeks now. So for next time, what I'd like to try is reducing the time spent on them and try to get into the main bulk of the session sooner after a general warm-up. This will potentially allow for more training and a larger overall session stimulus. What I want to try and avoid is this 5 to 10 minutes drifting into just going through the motions without any sort of justifiable benefit. There are clear physiological and psychological benefits to warming up. However, if there is a clear strength or capacity deficiency in her glute med, then I ask myself, would it be more beneficial to just use sort of exercises that require high recruitment of these specific fibres to provide them with an adequate and progressively overloaded stimulus using research such as this piece carried out by Raymond Bolger and Luden in 2011. So the next section of her session involves some jumping drills in order to potentiate her for her heavy squats, some joint health and just general robustness, alongside adding in some variation to her training. 3 jumps. We've got increasing pogos just on the spot. So what I want you to do is hands on hips. Okay, we're going to be popping up. I'm trying to bring the toes up to the sky and then attacking the ground. And I want you to sort of build to like a high one and then back down. Okay, so sort of nice and light to start with, and then we're building. So typically I'll choose 2 to 4 jumping drills with various depths, ground contact focuses and directions of movement. This particular session involved incremental pogos with a focus on being quick off the ground and increasing in the intensity up and then back down, followed by some deep squat pulses with the addition of a med ball. Finally, we had some seated vertical jumps, again just to potentiate her for her subsequent squats. So upon reflection, we're going to try and sink into a deep squat, okay, and we're just going to pulse here, okay. So med ball's just holding us upright. We're trying to sit in that deep range for about 6 to 8 at the bottom. So yeah, upon reflection, I noticed that I could have included much more detail around why I'm asking her to do these drills, or alternatively asked if she wanted to know the purpose behind them, just to ensure that she understands the intent behind each drill and sort of my rationale as for their inclusion. Alongside this, I think that my use of variation each week makes it difficult to track progression over time, so a more structured prescription might alleviate this. However, on the flip side, the variation provides slightly different stimuluses week to week, and they can prevent any sort of stagnation in training. So there's a sort of argument for each case. So I think maybe just being maybe prescriptive for a duration of time, but adding in subtle variations, sort of across the training cycle. So the deep squat pulse jumps were prescribed to warm up the the spinal erectors, along with the muscles involved in articulating the hip and knee joint under deep flexion. With the med ball being an external focus of attention, so I could have reinforced and improved that by ensuring, or at least cueing the med ball to stay above the head to really challenge that target musculature and to force my client to stay in that upright position. Okay, so with the final jumping drill then, the seated counter movement jump, again, upon reflection, there's scope to gamify this element to really sort of drive intent and gain insight into her readiness to train and tracking over time. And I've got access to and use myself sort of valid and reliable applications, such as the MyJump Lab, that can measure jump height via the phone's camera. And so potentially not using these tools, I could be missing this opportunity. So moving forward with any sort of high intensity jumping drill, the use of this augmented feedback as a tool could be a great way to potentiate and bring out my client's competitive spirit, asking us to try and beat her jump height rep to rep and week to week. Again, just sort of driving that intent as well. So moving on to the main lift of her session then. Right, Ellie, so we're going to do some pause back squats. So just set yourself up as usual. Okay, get yourself under, nice and central. Okay, couple of steps back, nice and tight upper body. Big deep breath in, and then we're going to come down to sort of just parallel, pause there, and then driving up nice and fast. Okay, coming down, pause, driving up. So yeah, we've been focusing on pause back squats as she's tended to get stuck at the bottom position during her regular squats, so we wanted to develop strength in that range. Watching the footage back, I think my instruction coaching was sufficient as we've been using this exercise for several weeks now. So she only needed minimal input, mainly around reinforcing having to pause at the bottom, as this is the focus of the exercise. Due to the nature of my client's work schedule and external stresses, I try to be quite agile in my approach to intensity prescription. Typically, I aim to get her to work up to what she perceives as a challenging set, using the RPE scale to gauge effort, and we'll complete our working sets at this load. This can fluctuate week to week due to the reasons previously stated. However, as with the jumping drills, again, I've got access to phone applications that can measure barbell velocity, which could use as a proxy for sort of readiness to train and add a layer of objectivity to the load prescription. And then from this information, I could then aim for specific velocities to ensure that she's still getting the desired stimulus regardless of the load. And again, as with the previous jumping drills, there's an opportunity to gamify her training. Okay, be less concerned with the load on the bar, more about maybe the speed of the bar. It's a nice way to sort of auto-regulate her training. So one of the accessory exercises was a split stance dumbbell RDL, and a constraint I put in place this week was using a foam roller placed on the lateral part of her rear knee as she was internally rotating this knee prior to this. As good as a constraint this is, it's going to force her into sort of a good position. Thinking about this after the session, I don't know if it was a suitable regression or alternative. The reason being is that I don't know why seeing some internal rotation at the hip during that split stance RDL was deemed as incorrect. And having thought about this particular exercise, I think maybe the foam roller should have been placed on the medial aspect of the front knee to target her adductors more. So the constraint put in place also led to reduced stress put on the system as we had to use less load. So this trade-off between load and correct technique may lead to suboptimal loading of the target tissue, which in this case is the hamstring group. I think I was too quick to jump to trying to sort of correct, in inverted commas, her technique without fully considering the reasoning. So moving forward, this movement could be integrated as part of the warm-up to activate the musculature around the hip in a dynamic way. And in addition, when prescribing regressions or constraints, I should be reminding myself of the purpose of each exercise. And if the regression takes away too much from the stimulus I am trying to provide, then maybe it's not worth regressing. Okay, so this concludes my vlog. Thank you very much for listening, and here are my references.